We are on page 64, tractate פסחים, משנה. הפסח נשחט בשלוש כיתות, שנאמר ושחטו אותו כל קהל עדת ישראל. קהל ועדה וישראל. So, this is a just illustration of the preparation for Paschal Lamb, the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And it was three different groups that get there and partake of that mitzvah. So, what happened? They get together around the Beit HaMikdash, and it was group of people that divided the offering of the Pesach to a group. So Rashi tells us that they do it as a group of people, and they divided it for a reason. What's the reason? The Torah tells us in the book of Shmot, book of Exodus, chapter 12, Veshachatu oto, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall offering it in the afternoon. So, since we have three different words here, one is called Kehal. What is Kahal? Kahal, it's like assembly. Adat, you have some congregation that name Adat is like gathering of congregation. Eida, and the third one Israel. So you have three different words that expresses the idea of offering the Paschal Lamb, and this pasuk specifically discuss the Korban Pesach, the offering of Passover when they left Egypt. So even they did not slaughter all of them in one location, but each person at the Egyptian Exodus, they did it individually at their home. When it's come to Beit HaMikdash, they divided them. Let me share with you a Yerushalmi that said as follows: Nitan koach bekolo shel Moshe. This is more interpretation of the text. It was a special power, special strength in Moshe Rabbeinu voice. V'haya mehalech bechol eretz Mitzrayim. He walked throughout the land of Egypt. U'ma haya omer? What did he say? Mimakom ploni ad makom ploni kat echat, u'mimakom ploni v'ad makom ploni kat echat. Which means he dedicated this different location for different group of people that assemble for bringing the Paschal Lamb. So again, what we understand so far, when it's come to Passover, Paschal Lamb, they divided them to three different groups, and they brought together the Paschal Lamb. But how the process took place? נכנסה כת הראשונה, נתמלאה עזרה, נעלו דלתות העזרה. You have the first group. The first group walk in. Imagine, just an illustration. Imagine that the first group get together, and then the courtyard was filled. So those doors were closed. So later the Gemarrah explained to us how it happens. For example, the opening of those doors happened as one of those long list of miracle. You remember when we studied Pirkei Avot and we talk about miracle? Now, then tak'u, heriu vetak'u. So it was a time that they, you see here an illustration. What do? No, tell me. What do you see here?
the Gemarrah to blow the shofar.
Right. They sounded the uninterpreted, broken and uninterpreted trumpet blasts, as was done while having the sacrificial offering. So, for any offering, public offering, they used to say this shira, this song, chanting, and they blessed those trumpet during that time. Since Passover is also considering a public offering, meaning even each and every individual has the obligation to partake of pag-aaral, still it's taken in that concept as a public. Even it's not, by definition, it's not korban tzibur, it's not a public offering, but since it's applied to each and every individual, for that context we're considering as a gathering of a group, as a public offering. And those blasting of the trumpet is equal to Rosh Hashanah. You see, we're getting very close to the Rosh Hashanah. We have in Rosh Hashanah, I remember when we study tractate Rosh Hashanah, we said that there is a certain decorum, which is tekiah, teruah, tekiah, one of those sets. So that's the way they did it in the Beit HaMikdash. Remember that text we read, Al oloteichem ve'al zivchei shalmeichem. Zivchei shalmeichem, the rabbi said, that's applied to pag-aaral. So, if you take, for example, daily offering. Daily offering is a public offering. So, they used to do this shira and do the blasting of the trumpet while they have the wine libation. But since the pag-aaral doesn't have that part, which is the libation, so you do that during the time of the offering. That's a well-known Rambam. Now, HaKohanim omdim shurot shurot ubidehem bzichei chesef ubzichei zahav. Remember the illustration? The Kohanim were standing as a line and line, and they hold in their hand, they held balls. It's called bazichin of silver and balls of gold. Why? Because they have this acceptance of the offering, the blood of the offering. And in general, it was in the north part of the altar. Even they can do it anywhere in the courtyard. Shura shekula kesef, kesef. Shura ושורה שכולה זהב, זהב לא היו מעורבים. So, which means that it was a line, that they used a ball of silver, a line, gold, etc. They do not go from one location to another. Later the Gemarrah explain why. In general, it's called noi, meaning for the beauty. If you look at the, for example, the Chinese, when they have the marching of the armed forces, it's very impressive when you see the order of so many that does those certain decorum of ceremonial decorum. So in that sense, for sure we don't compare it, but in that sense you have a certain beauty when they set up in a certain decorum of order. ולא היו לבזיחין שוליים, and those part, the ball did not have a flat basis that will allow them to be put down. Out of the concern of the reason for that is shema yenichum v'ikrash adam. So if the Kohanim will put them on the ground and forget them, what happened? The blood will congeal and become disqualified for using it as sprinkling on the altar. So because they have so many offerings, and maybe the Kohanim some of them get overwhelmed, and they put this vessel on the ground, so then when the blood is continual, then is no longer qualified to use as a sprinkling, which was part of the ritual. Shachat Yisrael vekibel hakohen. If the Yisrael, which is again shchitat korbanot, when it's come to a offering, you can have it even by non-kohen. It's called zar, because the whole ritual, everything has to be by the kohen, but the shchita, the slaughtering, can be by others. Rashi said that it's not preferable, it's not advisable, but sometimes by force of circumstances it's possible that a regular person, a regular Yisrael, can involve but solely and only the slaughtering part. Vekibel hakohen, and the kohen receive this part, the dam, with a special bazach, it's called, from that neck of that animal. No, lachavero, v'chavero lachavero. They pass it from one to another. Why? Because it's part of the glory that do it in a large amount of people. It's called in the rabbinic writing, follow a line in the Tanakh, Berov Am Hadrat Melech, the glory of the king, when you have a large amount of people who involve in those rituals. Umekabel et hamale, umachzir et harekam, they receive the one who is filled and bring back the one is empty, which means they're using the right hand to do each part of this. Kohen hakarov etzel hamizbeach, the one kohen who stand close to the altar, zorko zrika achat keneged hayesod, he take the part which is the north and west sides of the altar, where there was a base which called kir yesod hamizbeach, bolet bitzfon ma'arav, that's the location he used it, and he sprinkled one single sprinkling. Now, יצתה כת ראשונה ונכנסה כת שנייה, יצתה שנייה ונכנסה שלישית. It was a different group. It was the first group go out, and when they finish, and the second one enter, and then the second one enter, and the third one. כמעשה ראשונה כך מעשה השנייה והשלישית. Everyone does the same. קראו את ההלל, when they blow, when they use those trumpets, and they beginning this slaughtering process, so they recite the Hallel. Now I ask you a question. Who did the Hallel? Who recited the Hallel? What do you think?
King David?
No, not King David. We talk about ritual in the temple. Much after his passing. Whom do you think? The Kohanim? What else? Anyone
Levi?
thinking about
Levi?
how about all the
all
Israel that was there?
All Israel,
All right?
Everybody.
So there is a little puzzling Rashi. Rashi tells us here, and also in Tractate Sukkah, page 54, that each group of people that brought the offering, they recite the Hallel at that time, which means everyone participant, not the Kohanim, they recite the Hallel. The one who understands that from Rashi is the Brisker of, it's a great book written by the great rabbi of Brisk, that he understands from Rashi, he wrote that it was the people who were in the courtyard. They recite the Hallel. Now, Tosfot tells us that no, the people who recited were the Levites. The same as all the other songs that they recite for the offering. Now, the Brisker Rav added to that, and he said that it was two type of shira, two type of chanting. Was one that the Leviim, the Levites, did for the offering, which is they use a trumpet, and they use it while the Kohanim did all the rituals. It's based of what we are going to study on page Tzadik Hey Amud Bet 95b. That that was the ritual, but when it's come to Pesach, the people Yisrael said a shira, chant this Hallel. But yes, the Minchat Chinuch have a big mahalach, a big question: what exactly involved here? If it's something that it's involved like all the other work in the Beit HaMikdash or not. But in short, what we understand is that it was a chanting, a reciting of the Hallel at that time. If you pay attention, doing the Haggadah, what we're doing nowadays, which is a reflection to that time, we recite the Hallel, and it's basically doing those ritual of the Passover Seder. In Gamru, if they complete the recitation of the Hallel, and still part of the public, part of the people involved with the process of slaughtering the Paschal lamb. Why? Because there are so many, right? Shanu, what do? We don't waste time. They just repeat, saying again the Hallel. Ve'im shanu, shileishu. If still they finish the second time, there are still people did not complete, they repeat the Hallel. They don't waste time, right? To do it nowadays. What people does when they have nothing else to do, they watch TV, right? In those days, when they have to do something, they continue their prayer and chanting to Hashem. Shileishu, then they do the third time. Af alpi shelo shilshu mimehem. Because the Kohanim was so conscientious, and they did everything right and clear and quick, etc. So Rashi tells us in Tractate Sukkah, page 54, that it never happened in the history that they have to recite the Hallel 3 times. It's just in theory, which means they complete all the work earlier. רבי יהודה אומר, מימיהם של כת שלישית לא הגיעו לאהבתי כי ישמע השם מפני שעמה מועטים. He said, when in those times that it was a third group, they never reached even the part of the Hallel, which is from Tehillim, from Psalm 116. I love that Hashem hear the voice of my supplications. That's part of the Hallel. He says it never reached that point because they are very quick. So there's a Gemarrah that said that kat shlishit atzlanim, that's applied to people who are lazy. They reach they are so slow, right? And k'maaseu bechol, kach maaseu b'Shabbat. The same way that they did during the week, it happened also when the eve of Passover occurred on Shabbat. Ela, during Shabbat, one event expresses a different, which is שהכהנים מדיחים את העזרה שלא ברצון חכמים. So it happened at that time that the Kohanim rinse the temple courtyard, which means they clean those floor of the Azara, of the courtyard, with water, even on Shabbat, and the sages were unhappy. Anyone knows why the sages were unhappy? What do you think? What?
They're working.
So what's the issue? It was a water, okay, and they clean it, and they open a certain, like, for the better term, like a sewer line,
right.
like open some hole, so all the water running from one location. Since it was a lot of blood involved, etc., they cleanse it. Now, what's the issue? In one hand, the sages were unhappy, but it's not clear if they are in violation of Shabbat or not,
right.
because it's indirect involving violation, which is, it's called shvut shelo letzorech, because they involve with the big question if you can postpone it or you have to do it absolutely immediately. So there are things you have to do because otherwise there's no way to wait. But here there is some type of sense that it's not really for the purpose of the immediate need of those offering. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, when they complete all these ritual, kos haya memale midam ha'ta'arovet, which means it was not only on Shabbat, it was every day, that it took the Kohen filled up a cup of a dam, which was from many different offerings. Zrako zrika achat al gabe hamizbeach. He sprinkled it, one single sprinkling upon the altar, okay, because it was a chashash shema nishpechu. It was a concern, maybe they are sprinkled, so he used only one. Velo dulo chachamim, and the sages was not happy, would not agree with Rabbi Yehuda in regard to that. Why they're not happy? Later, in the next page, the Gemarrah explains. Keitzad tolin umafshitin. What exactly involved in that ritual when it's come to those already slaughtering offering? So they basically suspend and flay the Paschal lamb. So they do it as follows: unkaliyot shel barzel hayu kvuim baktalim uba'amudim. It was iron hooks were secured into the wall, and it was pillars shebahen tolin umafshitin, that use it to suspend the offering and flay it. כל מי שאין לו מקום לתלות ולהפשיט, מקלות דקים בחלקים היו שם, ומניח על כתפו ועל כתף חברו ותולה ומפשיט. So it was a process. If someone have no place among the hooks, so they to suspend and flay, so there were the thin, smooth rods there, which will place his own shoulder and shoulder upon his fellow, and they do it in that ritual so they can hold it. When I was in service, I remember we used to go to those marketplaces in, for example, in Gaza. So you see how they do it, a mass production of those slaughtered animals, and they put it in a special display while they hang them in that manner. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Arba'a Asar, Rabbi Eliezer said, when the 14th of Nisan occurred. So we're page 64b. Shechal liyot b'Shabbat. So if it happened on Shabbat, it's not enough time to move the rod, because the Rambam said it's prohibited to do it on Shabbat. מניח ידו על כתף חברו ויד חברו על כתפו ותולה ומפשיט. So Rashi explained to us, ואינו יכול לתקן את המקלות. It's based on Gemarrah in Tractate Shabbat. Remember when we studied that it is the issue of tiltul muktzeh, to carry something that it's set aside. If you remember, the Rashash tells us it was a procedure. חזרו והתירו, it was back and forth. So therefore, they have to do all this process. Now, regardless if it was Shabbat or during the week, קראו והוציא את אימוריו, נתנם במגיס והקטירן על גבי המזבח, which means the Kohen will open and remove the sacrificial part, which is the fat and other part over the altar, and place the sacrificial parts in the lard basin and burn them on the altar. I remember as a child, just a side note, more than 40 years ago, so mom used to send my brother and I to a guy that sold only fish. It was a fish store. So he has like this large aquarium, and we pick the fish we like, and we brought it home. Mm-hmm. So I remember him, I'm talking more than 40 years ago. I don't know if you remember, some of you, you know, they give it to you, the fish, but how they do it, they heat it and then they open it. He take out all the inside. You see it sometimes in those big stores, right? They're taking the inside part, and then they set it up, they cut it in a certain way and put it in a bag. I remember that my brother always let me do that because he was scared that the fish will jump, not fully, but the part of that was always they pull inside the whole, how do you call it, intestine? What?
The guts.
The guts, they pull it outside. So here you see they pull out only the part that they need for the offering. Next, יצתה כת ראשונה וישבה לה בהר הבית, שנייה בחיל, והשלישית עומדת במקומה. So they have these three different groups. They have the first group that exit and remain in a temple mount. The second group will remain in the rampart, and the third group will stand the place in a temple. Why they do that? So if you look at the language, they use the word omedet or yashva. It's two different things. So they said, since only the king that came from David, King David, the descendants, the group, the Gemarrah in Yomi, page 54, said that that's the only group that can sit in a courtyard. So therefore, they have to do it in this process. The Rashash elaborate. Anyway, Chasheicha, when the Shabbat is over, it's already dark. יצאו וצלו את פסחיהם. Because remember, part of the process, before eating it, we need to roast the Paschal lamb. But that's not override Shabbat. The rest of that, yes. This one, not. So then they need to wait, and then they take it and roasted the Paschal lamb, and they left to their homes. Now, since we said part of the Mishnah, it was a three different group. אמר רבי יצחק, אין הפסח נשחט, אלא בשלוש כיתות של 30 בני אדם. He said that, remember we mentioned in the Mishnah that we have Kehal, Ada, Yisrael. And we explained that it was group. So he said, it has to be what? 30 people. Each group has to be 30 people. My Tama. Because the Torah said Kahal ve'eda ve'Yisrael, since the Torah used this term, and remember we said the congregation Eda, how many is Eda? It's a minyan, right? 10. So therefore, that's the reason they do it. Misap kalan I bevat achat, I baze achar ze. If it means 30 people gathered together to do it, or it was a three group of 10. So they said, Hilkach, since we have uncertainty, Be'inan, it's come to Paschal lamb, shalosh kitot shel 30 bnei adam. We have three different groups, and each group 30 people. The I bevat achat, if you tell me that 30 people does that together, ha'ika, we have already here 30. Ve'i bazeh achar zeh ha'ika, so we have also this process. Hilkach b'chamishin namei sagyan. So in 50 it's also fine. How? The aylet latim ve'avdei, ayle asara v'nafke asara, ayle asara v'nafke asara. So you have all together how many? You have 50. The first it's 30, and they doing their offering, and then 10 go and 10 come in, 10 go and 10 come in. So you have each time 30 people. So what's the idea of 30 people? So we mentioned earlier that it's the glory of the king, and when you have many people bringing Hashem's glory, it's bringing also the beauty of those gathering of people for honoring of the mitzvah of Pesach. So the Ozaru explains that they have to have at least 30 people. Why? Because otherwise, if you have people that already completed their work, it's an issue for them to stay there, to be there. The Rambam said something very interesting. He said in Halacha that less than 50 people, they do not do the Paschal Lamb. Why? Because he said in order to fulfill this biblical precept of Kehal Adat Yisrael, assembly, congregation Yisrael, so you don't have that if you have less than 50. But he said, the Rambam said, b'di'avad, if there are circumstances you don't have other choice, so less, it's fine. It's accepted, which means as long as you have, for example, b'vat achat, together 49 people. However, the tzlach comment on the Rambam, and he said, we mentioned, if you remember when we studied this, we said Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha, he tells us that if there are urgent needs, you remember it was those days of persecution, those days that wasn't really opportunity for all kind of reasons, between persecution, poverty, and all the other reasons, that you don't have those capabilities. So what do? You have everyone go with one Paschal lamb. So he said, in those situations, b'di'avad, it's fine. But this Rambam, it's really mind-boggling. Here I'm asking those who view us, not only the people who attend, if they have explanation of this Rambam, which I try while preparing this shiur, try to understand this Rambam. If they understand, please email me. My email is rabbimpw@gmail.com. Please explain to me this Rambam. Why lechatchila, if we have less than 50 people, we cannot bring the Korban Pesach. Next, the Mishnah said, Nichnesa kat rishona. Yes?
I can take a venture to guess. I'd like to provide an explanation, maybe in one thought. Maybe because they want to make sure they want to be over and above the amount of people.
The decorum, the basic decorum.
Yeah, they don't want to be...
So why the Rambam said that if you have less medieval, it's okay? In other words, he said if you have less than 50 people, you don't have the Korban Pesach, because you cannot fulfill the Kehal Adat Israel.
Right. But if you have
so
more...
it means that people go home and they don't have any Paschal lamb, by this Rambam. But on the other hand, we said, Rabbi Shimon ben Kocha said, that they're all in those pressed needs. So they're all, Kol Israel Yotzim bePesach Had. Everyone goes by one Paschal
lamb.
lamb.
The Rambam takes a stricter viewpoint.
So in other words,
maybe they go gather more people because of...
You gather more people, but if you have 49 people, so you cannot do it. Forget about Paschal lamb by this Rambam.
Oh, because you still have the 30.
I don't get it fully. But anyway, Nichnesa kat rishona. They filled up this courtyard. So they said, this is fascinating Gemarrah. Listen carefully. It's one of those Gemarrah that it's really beyond fascination in my view. Okay. Itmar Abaye amar nin alutnan, Rava amar no alintnan. So imagine that's the doors of the courtyard. And they said, in one place they said that 40 years before the Korban, before the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, the door of the Beit HaMikdash, the courtyard were opened by themselves. That's one of the miracles that happened Beit HaMikdash. But that's before they even start the service. It's like David will tell you, when it's come to security, there are those, you also involved in security business, right? They have those signals that sees people come in and out, and boom, they open the door. But that was before the era of technology, and those doors were open automatically, right? Anyway, but they said, Rava said no, they physically closed the door. My benai, what's the real difference? Ika benai mismach anisa. Abai amar nalutnan kama de'ailu ma'alu v'samchin anisa. Wow. One said that they really depend upon miracle, which means that the big question is, can you depend on miracle or not? So one said yes. They knew that that's part of the happening, and they just waiting for that to happen. Now, the issue is they want people to do it, but they don't want everyone in one time. Soon you see why. Rava amarno al lintnan velo samchin al anisa. Rava said no. They closed those doors in order to make sure that there are people outside that ready for the other shifts, the other kitot, other assembly of people, and they do not depend upon miracle. What's involved here? The Hadetnan, there is Mishnah in Tractate Adayot, chapter 5. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Chas v'shalom she'akavya ben Malalel nitnada. It was a story that about a great rabbi by the name of Akavya ben Malalel, that he somehow belittled or denigrated the honor of Shma'aya and Avtalyon, which is a pair. Remember in the ethic of the father we learned. So they put him under the excommunication, and then, according to that tradition, they disregarded his coffin when he passed. But others disagree strongly and say that it's not him, and it doesn't happen to him. It happened to someone who belittled the rabbi's ruling over ritual purity of hands, request of a hand wash. שאין הזרה ננהלת על כל אדם בישראל בחומה ויראת חקר קו מנהלל. They said even that it was a time that they have such a huge crowd and the doors of the courtyard closed, no one, Rashi said, in the level of spirituality and fear of God than Akavya ben Malalel. But it was only in order not to denigrate the honor of the president, the head of rabbinic court, etc. אביי מתרס לטעמי ורבא מתרס למי. אבי מתרס לטעמי, אין בעזרה בשעה שננהלה על כל אדם בישראל בחוכמה ויראת חקר קו מנהלל. It wasn't anyone in his caliber of הקו מנהלל. רבא מתרס לטעמי, אין בעזרה בשעה שנועלים אותה על כל ישראל בחוכמה ויראת חקר קו מנהלל. Which means that that's physically, they don't depend on miracle, they physically close those doors. תנו רבנן, מעולם לא נתמעך אדם בעזרה חוץ מפסח אחד שהיה בימי הלל, שנתברך בו זקן אחד והיו קוראים אותו פסח מאוחין. It was one time during the Hillel's era that it was one person that passed, meaning that one old man that was crushed, when they call that Passover the crush, which means it was so many people, it was so packed that one elderly person crashed at that time, and they call it Passover crash. So there is a book called Sefer HaGilgulim. Now I'm going to tell you something a little scary, but it's not my idea. It's written in the book by Maharam Mipano, which was one of the leading Kabbalists, who said in book of Gilgulim, which means book of transmigration of souls, and he said that it was elder person that was a soul, transmigrated soul of Elisha the prophet. That mean it was a shalish, a fellow that lived at the time of Elisha the prophet, and he did not believe what Elisha tells the people, that the Jewish people are going to have a salvation, redemption, and that state of poverty that took place in Samaria at that time going to end soon. That's the word of Elisha, and everything is going to turn around for good. That fellow said, no, the people are wicked, they do not deserve miracle, and that's not going to happen. So basically, he challenged what the prophet Elisha tells people. In other words, he did not foresee the prognostication of Elisha. He prophesied that good will come out. So then it turns the way the Tanakh described in the canon, that was a miracle, and everything turned around, meaning in a very quick way. So that person who was so negative, they appointed him to be the one who in charge for the treasurer, and because it was a mess, everybody came there to collect the food, because people you read in the book of Kings, the second one, chapter 7, that was a great poverty and everyone wants the food. So the moment they opened and it was a mass production of that food, that fellow, because of so many people, he crashed. In other words, somehow punishment. So they said here the same, that he has the enviness, the evil eye of so many people who were there in the Beit HaMikdash doing those three truths, and therefore he punished again. This is a transmigration of souls, that he didn't see things in a positive way by seeing so many people get together to the courtyard to do those mitzvahs of Pesach, and as a result he was crushed to death. So in other words, it was a transmigration of that soul.
How does he know that specifics, that he wasn't?
That's Kabbalists. Who am I to comment over Kabbalists? They have their capability, their, how do you call it, clairvoyant capabilities. They are, such a giant that I'm have a long way to reach the dust of their feet. I don't know, but I do know that they have those traditions and those capabilities to see things that they understand as a transmigration of certain souls, and that's in the Kabbalah literature. Anyway, תנו רבנן, פעם אחת ביקש אגריפס המלך ליתן עיניו באוכלוסי ישראל. In several places we learn that we do not count people. Remember when we have a minyan, we said, הושיע את עמך וברך את נחלתך ורם ונשא מד העולם. You're counting in that word of the line in the text, and you know how many people you have. But it was King Agrippa wishes to set his eye on the multitudes of Israel, to know how many they were. אמר לכהן גדול, how he wants to count the people. He said to the high priest, תן עיניך בפסחים, go and check the Paschal lamb and count how many they have. נטל כוליה מכל אחד. So he took a kidney from each one, as the kidney are burned on the altar, and ונמצאו שם 60 ריבו סוגי כליות, which means it was like counting 2, that's the way people counting, like pairs, and it was 60 ריבו, כפליים כיוצא מצרים, חוץ מטמא ושעה בדרך רחוקם, ואין לך פסח ופסח שלמנו עליו יותר מ10 בני אדם, ויקוראים לו פסח מרובים. So basically the way we counted it here is 12 million people, at least. But because so many, how do you say, Kenai Nahar, right? So it was so crowded, they call that the Passover of the crowded, because there are so many people was there. Soon it happens. It will happen. We'll build the temple, we'll have it. Natal Kulya Habaya Aktura. How you tell me that he took the kidney? You need to burn it on the altar. So they said, the Hadar Maktir Lehu. After they counted, what did he do? He first took the kidney for the count, because that's the request of the king. and subsequently he burned them. והכתיב והקטירו, they said in the book of Leviticus, והקטירו הכהן המזבחה, chapter 3, they said that the Kohen shall burn it on the altar. It is the food of the offering made by the fire to Hashem. So he said, שלא יערב חלביו זה בזה, that he must not mix the fats of this sacrifice with those another, rather he must burn each of them separately. So they said, the hadar maktir le'uchad achada, that he put one by one. והתניא ויקטירן שיהיה כולו כאחד, the Torah said it should be in one time, אלא, you have to say, תפיסה בעלמא, דשקל מניה דביא למין אחרינה. So the Kohen, what did he do? He took them from them until they brought is something else, with which to keep track of the numbers, and it was this order item that was counted afterwards. So that way he was able to do it. So in other words, he hold it, Rashi said, and he showed it to everyone next to him. And the person next to him, what they do? They took a stone or something and put it next to that. And that's the way they were able to count while they're doing the ritual. Kohanim omdim shurot shurot. The Kohanim, the priest, stood in rows. That there were a row of priests holding silver balls and row of priests holding the gold ball. But there is no rows that were both gold and silver balls. That's what we said in the Mishnah. My Tama, why they put it in such an order? So maybe the Kohen return take the gold ball and keep it for himself, and then return a silver one for its place. So that's called Horada Bakodesh. What is Horada Bakodesh? When we have sanctity, something signified, there are different levels. We always go uplifted in a scale of Kedusha. We don't go below. So therefore, if the Kohen use the beginning with gold, he using gold materials, and now he using silver, is basically denigration, going down, and it's incongruous. Hachana medilma shakli bar matan ume'al yebay mea. So what happened is, if the Kohen take the 200 dinar ball and keep it for himself, and then he return 100 dinar ball in its place, so they said, Ela dehache shapir fei. So the reason is that this arrangement, where all the balls in each row are the same color, is basically when you talk about the way that it should look in the sense of beauty, it's more attractive to see it in that way. So it's honoring of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, the offering, etc. So that's the more aesthetically, is more beauty to do it in this order. ולא היו לבזיחים שוליים, and the balls did not have flat bases. Why? You remember we said that the blood can be congenial, and then they cannot sprinkle it. תנו רבנן, כל הבזיחים של המקדש לא היו להם שוליים. All the balls of those used in the Beit HaMikdash in the temple had flat bases. Chutz, there's one exception, מבזיחי לבונה של לחם הפנים, שם היה ניחום ויפרוס הלחם. It was those balls that they used for the shore bread, right? So it was lechem apanim, that they have a flat basis, because they don't have a sharp bottom, because the Kohanim will rest them on the bread, and the bread will break, and you have to have this shore bread, that they have to have a delicate shape. So therefore they don't have that. The ball with a shape bottom could pierce and break the bread. Shachat Yisrael vekibel hakohen. So we explained earlier that when it's come to shchita, it's, according to Rashi, it's not preferable, but it's possible that everyone, including regular Israel, Zar, can do it. So the Israelite will do the shchita of the offering, and the Kohen receive it and pass it to the next Kohen. So they said, Lo sagya del Av Israel. So what's the story? It's not sufficient that someone who's not Israelite do this process of slaughtering the offer. So he gufa kamashman the shchita bezar kshera. That's a proof that come to do shchita, the slaughtering, can be by people who are not kohanim. Vekibel hakohen, the kohen received this blood. Hakamashman mekabla va'elach mitzvat kehuna. So we derive from that the receiving, the onward, the right is the commandment that cast upon the kohanim, the priesthood, and someone who's not kohen cannot perform it. Notno lachavero v'chavero lachavero. So the kohen will pass the bowl of this blood and give it to the next kohen. Shmat mina. Remember we talked day before yesterday that is a full process. We have shchita, we have the process of holacha, that's one of the four. So he basically, how we do that? Shelo baregel havya halacha. That we learn from that carrying without walking, which means transporting the blood to the altar by passing it from hand to hand without actually walking with it to the altar, it's considering a valid act of carrying this dam hakorban, the blood of the sacrifice, to the altar. One of the four rites involved with the offering of a sacrifice. So he said, Dilma hu nayed puta, because it may happen that the Kohen will move from his place, going close to the altar while he's doing this ritual. So that's the idea of halacha. Ve'ela mai kamashmanan. So what the Mishnah wants to tell us? Kamashmanan berovam adrat melech. Again, the whole idea that you do that is because you have to have the more people involved with this, the beauty of God. So that's bring the glory of God when everyone, all the Kohanim involved in Avodat Beit HaMikdash. Kibel et hamaleh umachzir et harikan. So he received, the Kohen received the full bowl, and then he returned the empty one to his fellow. Aval ipcha lo, but the other way around, no. מסייע לרבי שמעון בן לקיש, דאמר רבי שמעון בן לקיש, אין מעבירים על המצוות. We studied it day before yesterday, if you remember the Shagat Aryeh. If you have a mitzvah, remember we talk about talit and tefillin, etc. So you have one mitzvah, you not disregard it for another mitzvah. You have to do the mitzvah that you have right away in front of you. So if you have now tefillin, you don't have yet talit, you put the tefillin first, because then, so here, when you have this full of bowl, you have to do the mitzvah right away of carrying it, holacha, and then you return the empty bowl.
Yeah. But how can it be like, I understand one mitzvah consists, but isn't there an order for the process?
Order the process is a good point, but here there is a process of these four things, but there is also the part that can do not only to make it quick, but it's a subsequent. It's not part of that, because they are doing holacha. It's just making it in a sense quicker by carrying and putting and bringing and taking it.
Okay.
So it's not changing the decorum of the process. Kohen הקרוב אצל המזבח, מה איתן הפסח בזריקה? Who teaches us that when it's come to Passover you have to have this sprinkle from far away and not just putting it slowly and joyfully? אמר רבי חיסדא רבי יוסי גלילי. בתניא רבי יוסי גלילי אומר, we said in the Torah, in book of במדבר, book of Numbers chapter 18, את דמם תזרוק על המזבח ואת חלבם תקטיר. They said that you should take they sprinkled the blood upon the altar, and then they said, and then the rest you should burn. Damo lo ne'emar, it's not written in singular blood, ela damam, it's plural. Chelbo lo ne'emar, fat is not written in singular, ela chelbam in plural. So it means that we incorporate other offering while you're doing this sprinkling and making the burning of the imurim. Limed al bchor umaaser upesach, firstborn, tithe and Passover, שהן טעונים מתן דמים ואמורים לגבי מזבח, that all this they have to have the requirement placement of the blood and sacrificial part on the altar. מנהלן לטעונים יסוד. How do you know that sprinkle of the blood of Passover you have to have it at this corner of the altar of the side that has a base? So they said, Amar Rabbi Lazar, Atya zrika zrika me'ola. We learn it by juxtaposition of using the word zrika, zrika, sprinkling, twice when it's come to a burn offering. Ktiv hacha, it's written when it's come to Passover, et damam tizroktam ala mizbeach. You should sprinkle the blood on the altar. Uchtiv atam, it's written in the book of Leviticus, chapter 1, when it's come to Ola, burning offering, וזרקו בני אהרון הכהנים את דמו על המזבח סביב. The sons of Aaron, the priest, shall sprinkle its blood round about upon the altar. So how we derive it? מה עולה טעונה יסוד, אף פסח נמי טעון יסוד. Just as the blood of the burnt offering must be sprinkled on the altar, the place where there's a base, so too the blood of the Paschal lamb must be sprinkled in the place where there is base. Page 65, just few lines. Ve'ola gufa menalan. How do you learn in regard to burnt offering that you have to do it a certain place, which is the western north part of the altar, but not east-south part? That's what Rashi said. Amar Kra, the Torah said in regards to a sin offering of the Nasi, of the president, Torah said in Vayikra in Leviticus chapter 4, Ve'et damo yishpoch el yesod mizbach ha'ola, and he should pour the blood of the bull on the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is in the entrance of the tent of meeting. Alma ola te'una yesod. So you derive from that, when it's come to the ola, you have to have it sprinkled on the base, because the verse specifically links the base of the altar to the burnt offering. The Griza Levi, he explained in Hilchot Maaseh Korbanot the whole process. We do not have time for that. We go to a practical halachot. The Rambam tells us in Sefer Korbanot, Hilchot Korban Pesach, chapter 1, HaKohanim omdim shurot shurot. The Kohanim, the priest, will stand in rows, holding gold and silver bowl in their hands. So it was a separate rows for those holding gold bowls and those who hold silver bowls, and this formation allowed the rite to proceed more quickly. So they have it, and it wasn't issue of krishat adam, blood will not be congenial, and they do all this process, and then they recite the Hallel. So while the priest, the Kohanim, formed the rite of Paschal lamb, the Levite recited the Hallel. You see in the picture. If they completed its recitation before the conclusion of the rite, they repeated Hallel. And if necessary, they recite it a third time, but in practice, it was never necessary to do the efficiency of the Kohanim. Hallel was recited while the rite was performed for each of the group, but with the third group, they never completed Hallel even once, because it was a small group. And basically, the procedure for offering of Paschal lamb on the Pesach Eve that occurred on Shabbat, the same procedure on the weekday. We talk if Passover Eve occurred on Shabbat, the people did not carry the Paschal lambs home after the sacrificial process. Rather, the first group remained on the Temple Mount, The second group said while the temple, within the temple rampart. And the third group remained in the place of the courtyard until the conclusion of Shabbat. That's the way the Mishnah tells us. It was also a groups of 30 people. The Paschal lamb is slaughtered in the three groups, composed of the minimum of 30 people each. And the Rambam said, and that's one of those things I told the Rambam, it's a question, when it's come to 50, he said that was lechatchila, at least 50 people present. And that's one of those Rambams that it's a little bit mind-boggling. Let me just read this. The Rambam Sefer Korbanot, Hilchot Korban Pesach, chapter 1. Nishchat b'chamishim, the Paschal lamb was not slaughtered unless there were at least 50 people present lechatchila, ab initio. If there were only 50 people, 30 of them will enter and offer their sacrifices, 10 of them will then leave, and another 10 will enter to form a second group. 10 more people will then leave, and the last 10 will enter the form of third group. If the Paschal lambs were all slaughtered in one group, they were nevertheless valid, but it's only b'di'evet.